Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anupama, Professor at Department of Economics, Punjabi University, Patiala. I am going to talk about the module Homelessness and Social Segregation from Population, Urbanization and Poverty. So students, we are going to discuss about homelessness and social segregation, its causes, extent, and various policy options to come out of this problem. Housing is the basic necessity of every individual that provides economic and social security to individuals in the society. It measures the economic well-being of the individuals and his social status. It has significant leveraging effect for the individual as well as the entire economy. Housing and housing related infrastructure in a country is a reflection of a nation's economic and social well-being. However, homelessness today is not only a feature of the poor developing economies, but it can also be found in the developed advanced economies. The unprecedented level of homelessness in advanced economies is one of the most visible symptoms of social change in the era of globalization. In the urban areas of these economies, the poverty and inequality have reached alarming and unacceptable levels. It is also a harsh reality that the ethnic minorities experience these inequalities more widely and deeply. We might therefore assume that minority ethnic communities will experience inequalities in access to and consumption of housing, and that these inequalities will contribute to a continuing cycle of disadvantage. So, this module aims to answer the questions, that is, what is homelessness, what is social segregation, what is the extent of homelessness in India, what are the causes of homelessness in India, is there any difference in incidence of homelessness across social groups, what is the policy stance towards homelessness in urban areas of the country. Since the late 1980s, poverty has been linked to the state's decreasing capacity to provide to the majority of the citizens the minimum conditions for entry to the market. In the developed world, the safety nets are failing for some of the most vulnerable sections of the society. Stripped of their capacity to compete in a market economy, deprived of state welfare support, and devoid of social capital, most of the urban poor fall into the trap of homelessness. It is more alarming that the UN Habitat has predicted that the sharp rise in homelessness experienced in the recent times would continue as a steady rate. At the same time, recurrent racial, religious, and cultural resistance continues to lead to the formation of slums. Therefore, effective responses to the spatial constructions of poverty currently taking place, as well as the trend towards social segregation arising from inadequate urban policy, have to be found. In examining the structural issues related to poverty, Gelster suggests that the relationship between urban poverty among the marginalized social groups can yield more powerful explanations when housing discrimination is included. Thus, for the city governments, the challenge goes beyond combating homelessness. In the societies marked by social discrimination, the problem of homelessness has emerged as one of the most serious problems confronting urban policy. Theoretically, it was assumed that over the long run, market processes and societal development will ensure that all people are provided with such fundamental needs as shelter. However, in the current conjuncture of faster economic growth, the severity and durability of homelessness has rejected this idea. Therefore, it is important here to examine the causes, types, and extent of homelessness in urban areas. Defining homelessness. Homelessness or transience is a situation in which a person does not have a long-term or a stable residence or any residence at all, while groups such as nomadic cultures, travelers, or migrant workers are also transient. This is through choice, and some of these people may have a permanent residence somewhere to which they ultimately can return. At the most basic level, homelessness is defined by a lack of shelter in which to sleep and to perform basic activities such as bathing. However, in this definition, the term lack of shelter is not clear. Therefore, the most appropriate definition of homelessness that was formalized at the United Nations involves two criteria. Number one, not having a place that can be considered home and thus being forced to sleep in a temporary shelter or outside. Number two, having access to seriously deficient housing. Thus, to further clarify, this definition divides the homelessness into two categories. The primary homelessness or rooflessness. This category includes persons living in the streets without a shelter that would fall within the scope of living quarters. Secondly, the secondary homelessness. This category may include persons with no place of useful residence who move frequently between various types of accommodations, including dwellings, shelters, and institutions for the homeless or other living quarters. This category includes persons living in private dwellings but reporting no usual address on their census form. The broader definition embodies not only those who literally have no home but also those who do have some form of shelter but whose present housing situation is precarious and insufficient. The difference between these situations is often conceptualized as one between absolute homelessness, that is not having any home, and relative homelessness, that is having precarious or insufficient housing. Now we can also define social segregation. Segregation is the socially based separation of one category of people from another, usually perpetuating conditions of social inequality and oppression. It can be traced in the practice of separating people of different races, classes, or ethnic groups, as in schools, housing, and public or commercial facilities, especially as a form of discrimination. Most of the theories of homelessness find that there can be some association of homelessness with social marginalization. There are certain theories which relate homelessness with the individual characteristics or the personal failings such as disability, mental illness, substance abuse, criminal behavior, delinquency, family breakup, domestic violence, inability to work, or poor job skills along with the caste and ethnicity. But this discrimination is more likely to be aggravated if the structural characteristics of the economies lead to economic inequalities. In today's world, the market economies based upon neoliberal policies accentuate the economic inequalities not only by pushing the marginalized and less endowed sections to the margins of the society, but also by reducing the role of the government in provision of public services. In such societies, the prosperity is concentrated in few hands who live in palatial houses. In such growing economies, the problem of distribution is more important than that of production, and therefore homelessness will not be solved until structured inequalities in society are dealt with. This requires state intervention into the labor and housing markets to reduce wage inequality and to subsidize the construction of state-run permanent houses for low-income households. Many scholars who study homelessness recognize that both structural and individual perspectives are important to a full understanding of the phenomena. Therefore, the problem should be understood in the perspective of a mutual dependence of the individuals as well as structural causes. Now we can discuss the causes of homelessness. There are many individual and social issues concerning homelessness. One of the major causes of homelessness is poverty. Poor people are not in position to pay for housing, food, childcare, healthcare, and education. Low wages and little availability of public assistance are other causes of increasing homelessness. Only a small fraction of the welfare recipients' jobs pay above poverty wages. Most of them earn far below the poverty line. Job opportunities are lowering down, which make people homeless. Health factor is also a major determinant for homelessness. Today, families are struggling to pay rent if any serious illness or disability occurs in family. This step towards homelessness. Due to poor health conditions, people lose their jobs and unable to manage even basic necessities. Many studies recognized mental health problems as the fundamental cause of single homelessness. It is found that about 22% of severe mental patients are homeless. It is obvious that mentally ill people are not capable to afford supportive housing. Thus, homelessness is caused by a complex interplay between a person's individual circumstances and adverse structural factors outside their direct control. These problems can build up over years until the final crisis moment when a person becomes homeless. In this perspective, we can broadly classify the causes of homelessness in three categories. Number one, the personal causes, which may include one or more of the following, that is, the individual factors, including drug and alcohol misuse, lack of qualifications, lack of social support, debts, poor physical and mental health, relationship breakdown, and getting involved in crime at an early age. The second personal cause can be family background, including family breakdown and disputes, sexual and physical abuse in childhood or adolescence, having parents with drug or alcohol problems, and previous experience of family homelessness. The third personal cause is that of institutional background, including having been in care, the armed forces, or in prison. Another category of the causes behind homelessness are structural causes. The structural causes of homelessness are social and economic in nature and are often outside the control of the individual or family concerned. These may include unemployment, poverty, a lack of affordable housing, housing policies, the structure and administration of housing benefit, wider policy developments such as the closure of long-stay psychiatric hospitals. For many people, there is no single event that results in sudden homelessness. Instead, homelessness is due to a number of unresolved problems building up over time. Now we can talk about how homelessness is measured. Measuring homelessness is a tedious task, mainly due to the disagreement that who should be considered a homeless. Accurate figures on the global scale of homelessness are especially unavailable and underestimated, partly because it is difficult to pinpoint exact numbers of homeless people who have no address or contact information. United Nations Human Settlement Program estimates that 1.1 billion people live in inadequate housing conditions in urban areas alone, while an estimated 100 million have no housing whatsoever. In the United States, one of the wealthier developed countries, according to a 2007 study by the US National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty, some 3.5 million Americans experience homelessness each year. In many cities of the developing countries, more than half of the population lives in informal settlements without security of tenure and in conditions that can be described as life and health threatening. According to UN Habitat, India has lifted 59.7 million people out of slum conditions since the year 2000. But slum dwellers still make up 28.1% of India's population today. Although there is currently no global definition for homelessness and legal definitions vary from country to country, the element common to all homeless persons is lack of a stable residence to call home. The Census of India defines houseless people as the persons who are not living in census houses. The latter refers to a structure with roof. Hence, the enumerators took note of the possible places where the houseless population is likely to live, such as on the roadside, pavements, drainage pipes, under staircases, or in the open temple, mandaps, platforms, etc. This part of the population includes those sleeping without shelter, in constructions not meant for habitation, and in welfare institutions. The census in 2001 enumerated 1.94 million homeless people in India, of whom 1.16 million lived in villages and only 0.77 million lived in cities and towns. It is being estimated that the situation has not improved since then. Therefore, in order to have an idea about the severity of the problem, we can have a look upon the estimates of the Census 2001 about the homeless people in India in Table 1. The table shows that although the number of homeless families and the homeless population has declined since 1981, still 4.48 lakh families are homeless. Out of total homeless population of 1.94 million, 1.14 million are males and 0.8 million are females. The technical group on urban housing shortage has estimated a shortage of 18.78 million houses in 2012, in which 0.53 million households were completely homeless. Ironically, we also have a number of locked and vacant houses. Thus, we have the dual problem of unused houses, that is, houses without persons, and the persons without houses. The housing shortage and the number of vacant and locked houses in major states of India can be observed from Figure 1. The figure has highlighted the information on housing shortages in 7 major states with highest housing shortage. The figure shows that the housing shortage in these 7 states alone comprises 60% of total housing shortage in the country. These states are Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Bihar and Rajasthan. In the figure, we can note that in Maharashtra, the housing shortage is the second highest in the country after Uttar Pradesh, and this shortage is that of 1.94 million houses, but at the same time, we have about 2.25 million vacant and locked houses in the state. Such a mismatch clearly shows unequal distribution of property in the country. The components of housing shortage in India. Figure 2 brings forth various components of housing shortage in the country. This include the obsolescence factor, congestion factor and homeless people. These are the obsolescence factor. According to census 2011, there were about 0.99 million non-serviceable units. Further, NSSO 65th round estimate 2.27 million obsolete houses. These figures taken together work out to be 3.26 million or 17% of total housing shortage in the year 2012. The second one is the congestion factor. The ratio of households that are residing in unacceptably congested conditions from physical and socio-cultural point of view, with married couples sharing the room with other adults, etc., are estimated to be 14.9 million. This component constitutes the biggest proportion, that is 80% of the total housing shortage in the country. The third component is that of homeless people. Census 2001 data of 0.8 million homeless people has been assumed to remain constant during 2001 to 2011. Considering that half of the homeless are single migrants and other half have average household size of 3, technical group calculated total housing requirement of 0.53 million, that is 0.4 million for single migrants and 0.13 for rest with average household size of 3. Further elaboration of state-wise housing shortage can be observed from figure 3. Uttar Pradesh has the highest number of homeless people in the country. We can see that 3.07 million people are homeless in Uttar Pradesh. Further, Maharashtra is home to about 1.4 million homeless people, followed by West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Now we can look at the distribution of housing shortage across economic categories in India. The technical group also examined the housing shortage among various income groups. It has found 3/4 of the shortage in economically weaker sections with income up to rupees 5,000 per month category, and another quarter of the shortage is in lower income group, that is those having income between 5,001 to 10,000 per month category. In the latter, a significant proportion of shortage is on account of congestion in living conditions. Relatively, very few, that is 0.8 million households in the middle income and high income group, where middle income and above is defined as those earning above rupees 10,000 per month, are found to be facing the housing shortage. This group constitutes hardly 4.38% of the total housing shortage in the country. The distribution of housing shortage across income groups can be observed from the table 2. Now we can discuss about the relationship between social segregation and homelessness. In the context of Indian society and its caste system, traditionally associated with strong social and spatial segregation, The homelessness may also have varying designs across different social groups. These tendencies can also be found in other developed and developing economies. If social exclusion implies being completely cut off from the mainstream economy, the opportunities for social mobility through additional education, getting a new job, or an improved housing situation are absent. Thus, in turn, may add to the problem of deprivation and marginalization. It is generally argued that social segregation is a kind of spiral relationship through which lack of skills, qualifications, and work experience limit access to jobs and income. This results in lack of choice in the housing market and in a funneling into particular neighborhoods and parts of the housing market. These areas may become marked by a concentration of low-income households which are unlikely to provide a market for viable businesses. As a result, local employment opportunities are limited. Long-term unemployment contributes to already high levels of ill health and poor housing conditions or homelessness. Among such segments of the societies, the schools struggle with low motivation and underachievement. All of these problems place pressure on family and community life, and problems of racial harassment, crime, and the fear of crime are evident. In some cases, self-esteem is affected, and more generally, the residents of such areas are subject to adverse stereotyping which further limits their chances of obtaining employment. The cumulative process of social exclusion may then be at its worst where place of residence adds to other factors involved. We can find the evidences from separate studies which have indicated that the incidence of homelessness is higher among marginalized social groups, and at the same time, the households belonging to these minorities are overrepresented within the more precarious categories of homelessness. In Indian scenario, the poverty ratios among the SCs and STs are far higher than the other social groups. Similarly, the SCs and STs are also found to be overrepresented in low-paid, insecure, precarious jobs. Their access to education and health facilities also seems to be lower. These evidences may lead us to conclude that the homelessness among these groups would also be higher as compared to other social groups. Planning Commission of India and by Government of Delhi found that poverty is the more powerful factor than the caste for determining the incidence of homelessness. These studies have found that the homelessness is higher among OBCs and other castes, which are placed at a higher rank in the social hierarchy as compared to the SCs and STs. The Delhi Homeless Survey 2010 states that the homelessness among the Hindus is far greater than among other regions. It was found that out of the total homeless population in Delhi, 73.2% were Hindus, 26.3% were Muslims, and the rest belonged to other religious groups. On the other hand, the analysis of homelessness on basis of caste in the cities of Delhi, Madurai, and Chennai had found that a significant proportion, that is about 80% of those who could identify their caste belonged to OBCs and general castes, while the remaining is from SCs and STs. However, the results may not be fully reliable as a good number of chronic homeless people in urban areas, especially those who have been born and brought up on the pavement only, do not relate themselves to any social group. All they know is that they belong to the class of poor and deprived. But as we believe that poverty is the major determinant of homelessness and therefore evidences of higher poverty rates among the socially marginalized groups automatically draws the attention of the policymakers towards having a policy targeted at these groups. Since there is obviously a possibility of lack of information on caste of homeless person, his/her homelessness is a stark reality. Therefore, the national program on urban homeless people clearly takes into account all of these factors. In this slide, now we will discuss the policy initiatives regarding the homelessness in the country. Now we can talk about certain policy initiatives. Almost in every city in India, homeless citizens have remained almost completely neglected by local and state governments. Although there was a provision for night shelters in earlier plans, even this has lapsed due to lack of initiative by state and local governments. There is a wide policy neglect in the country regarding homeless people. Various stereotypes are associated with urban homeless, including labeling them as criminals, beggars, immorals, and so on. The courage, fortitude, and sheer enterprise that allows them to survive on the streets has not ever been recognized or even channelized. In placing homeless persons outside the society of legitimate urban residents, we are in effect de-enfranchising a large powerless population. Therefore, both at the level of attitude and at the level of development, policy changes are urgently needed. Although we had some early policy initiatives such as National Housing Policy 1988, National Urban Housing and Habitat Policy 2007, Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, Indira Awas Yojana, etc., but still a number of people live in roofless shelters and are homeless. Recently, Supreme Court of India took notice of the distressing conditions of Swear Daniels of the right to food and shelter of people living on the streets in Delhi, especially under extreme cold weather conditions, which constituted a threat to their fundamental right to life. It directed the government of Delhi to immediately provide shelter to all those without shelter, along with the basic amenities such as blankets, water, and mobile toilets. Government agencies joined hands to more than double the number of shelters in just 2 days. This major intervention of the Supreme Court led to the saving of precious lives of most vulnerable citizens of the capital city who were exposed to the winter cold. Going a step further, the Supreme Court also gave directions to all state governments for providing shelter to the urban homeless. The Delhi High Court has also been closely monitoring the situation of the homeless in Delhi. Most recently, the Supreme Court reiterated on January 9, 2012 that the right to dignified shelters was a necessary component of the right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. The Supreme Court interventions on urban homelessness and development programming for them have been seminal in terms of bringing to the public and policy agenda for the first time the need to develop right-based policy and programmatic interventions for homeless women, men, and children in India. Recognizing the fact that the existing services for the urban homeless in all the cities are seriously inadequate, a national program for shelter and other services for the urban homeless is therefore proposed, under which all state and local governments are required to build permanent shelters for the urban homeless with appropriate facilities to ensure fulfillment of their rights to life and shelter as per the Supreme Court directives. The costing of proposed national program for urban homeless shelters. The cost of this program has been calculated as to cover provision of shelter in all Class 1 cities and towns covering 15% of total homeless population. It is being estimated that the total homeless population is about 1% of total urban population. Through in million plus cities, there may be larger proportion. There are 499 Class 1 cities, including million plus cities and mega cities, as per 2011 census, where shelters will be built. Under this scheme, all shelters will be built within 3 years from the time of adoption of this scheme. Based on the current urban population as per the census of 2011, a total of 6,800 shelters, each shelter catering to at least 50%, will need to be set up to cater to the needs of homeless population in Class 1 cities of India. The total requirements of the shelters is given in the table 3. This means that total cost per shelter would be construction cost of rupees 25 lakhs. The total cost of constructing 6,800 shelters in the 12th plan is estimated to be 1,700 crore. This is one-time non-recurring fixed cost. This means that total cost per shelter would be construction cost rupees 25 lakh and 1 year operating cost of rupees 10 lakhs. Further, it is proposed that the fixed non-recurring cost for the construction and refurbishment of buildings be given by the center in the first 3 years, and in each of the first 3 years, the center's allocation for construction of shelters under this scheme would be rupees 1,700 divided by 3 or 567 crores each year for the first 3 years. Recurring or operational cost will be shared by center and states on a 75 to 25 share respectively. The division is further elaborated in table 6. The table shows that out of the recurring cost of rupees 3,400 crores, the center will contribute rupees 2,550 crores, which is 75% of the total cost, and rest 25%, that is rupees 850 crore, will be contributed by the state governments. We have seen that the total cost of providing 6,800 shelters in 5 years would be rupees 5,100 crores, out of which rupees 4,250 center share and rupees 2,850 will be state share. In table 7, we can see that out of rupees 4,250 crore, the central government will be spending rupees 2,550 crore on recurring and operating cost and rupees 1,700 crores on fixed non-recurring cost. Besides, it has also been felt that there is a need to bring convergence of services and benefits of different programs in view of the vulnerable sections of the homeless. They are often unable to access the benefit under development schemes or programs due to lack of documentary proof. Hence, it is suggested that all homeless persons should be given priority to the various entitlements and services such as PDS, ICDS, admission to government schools, Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, linkages to Rajiv Awas Yojana, and social housing schemes and healthcare services. They should also be facilitated to access free legal aid and opening of bank or post office account. There is a need to establish and comply with the protocol for inquest of homeless deaths. Appropriate guidelines may be issued in existing programs and schemes to cover the homeless, including BPL surveys. So students, let us sum up what we have learned from this module. We have observed that homelessness is the major manifestation of poverty and multiple deprivations. The homeless people live in deplorable and inhuman conditions, and their woes are further aggravated under extreme weather conditions. This calls for an urgent policy attention. The target of covering 15% of the homeless is too short as compared to the enormity of the problem. Therefore, it is suggested that more of the shelters should be built and operationalized so that the basic right to life can be ensured to the poor masses. That's all with today's lecture. I hope you must have enjoyed it. Thank you.